dopamine is going to be about. So dopamine is the only catecholamine that is a neurotransmitter, modulator, and a hormone precursor all at once. It encodes motivation rather than direct pleasure, unlike serotonin for mood and endorphins for pleasure. It tells you this matters. The beta hydroxyl group, the alkyl group, that is missing is what we keep being receptor binding local. What is keeping the receptor binding local to the central nervous system? So you can think of dopamine is staying in the brain rather than being transported down to the rest of the body like adrenaline, which would be everywhere. You feel adrenaline all over your body. It is synthesized in hubs of the substantia nigra and the ventral tegmental area. The dopamine pathways are segregated functionally, so the nigrostriatal, mesolimbic, mesocortical, and tuberinfundibular pathways are non-overlapping. And what I want to get to today is that it regulates the basal ganglia decision gates. So when we say that, it's really the key of what dopamine is, right? The basal ganglia decision gates. So we look up gates. So what is keeping the decision to go or not to go, right? This is talking about more of what is deep in the explanation, to go or not to go. So the basal ganglia looks like this, which is like the inner part of what your brain is. The basal ganglia do not initiate movement and it does not generate motor commands. The fundamental role is selection, right? Of all possible actions, thoughts or plans are available right now. Which one is allowed to proceed? Every moment, the cortex generates many competing motor, cognitive, and emotional programs. So, the basal ganglia gate these these programs. Gating happens continuously for physical movements, eye movements, speech initiation, thought transitions, behavior choices, habit execution, everything that's motivational, right? Dopamine determines how permissive or restrictive the gate is. So, core anatomical components of the loop, or the basal ganglia loop, right? Basal ganglia, right here. You think of the core brain, it looks like a little alien, almost like the reptile, the alien from the movie. The input would be the cerebral cortex, and then there's the striatum, right? But the cortex is what you get to. This is the input of what decides everything. And the output would be the globus pallidus or substantia nigra. So down here, it goes down here. So these alpha nuclei are tonically inhibitory. That means they are always firing, and they constantly suppress the thalamus. So the thalamus, right? It's here, it's constantly suppressed. And it goes thalamus to cortex. The basal ganglia is forming closed loops, so goes cortex, striatum, pallidum, thalamus, cortex. The default state is tonic inhibition, so in the resting state, the GPI and SNR are fired continuously. Thalamus is inhibited. Oh, it's perfect. Thalamus is inhibited and the cortex is restrained. This means nothing moves, nothing changes, nothing initiates unless inhibition is lifted. That is the key insight of what's going on. The basal ganglia do not activate actions, they remove inhibition from selected actions. And the two opposing pathways, so there's the direct pathway which is the go pathway, and then there's indirect pathway, which is the no-go pathway. The no-go pathway. The go pathway is expressed by D1 dopamine receptors and facilitates action initiation, while the indirect pathway expresses D2 dopamine receptors, so expresses action initiation. So you have to remember D1 is to go, D1 people, athletes go, while D2 are not Division 1, they don't go. But both pathways are active at the same time. And active selection is about balance, not on or off switching. So the direct pathway, step 1 is cortical activation. The cortex sends an excitatory glutamatergic signal to a specific group of striatal neurons. And these neurons express D1 receptors. So it references a specific action or plan, while in step 2, the striatum inhibits GPI or SNR. So activated D1 neurons inhibit the activated D1 neurons inhibit the GPI and SNR neurons, because usually these inhibit the thalamus. So the thalamus is always being inhibited, but it's allowing that to be decided by letting it work. So to go, we think of is to let this thalamus to work. Thalamus, I don't know if we can make something like this. Thalamus. You think of it as a bell. So a thalamus is essentially being allowed to exist. Right? So this would be basal ganglia. This is allowing it to be working. Ringing the bell and allowing it to be working. Right? It's allowing it to send signals it needs to go. The thalamus is disinhibited, and the inhibition of the thalamus is lifted, right? So this fork lift. This is disinhibition, not excitation. So thalamus activates the cortex, and thalamus sends excitatory signals back to the cortex. So it goes back and forth, right? From the cortex to the thalamus. And it's allowed to free rein. This is the go signal. The thalamus is allowed to ring and come back and forth. While the indirect pathway, the no-go pathway, the cortex also activates a different group of striatal neurons. These express the D2 receptors, and they represent competing or inappropriate actions. So thoughts that you don't act on. Okay. The striatum inhibits GPE, which is the globus pallidus externa, basal ganglia externa, and the globus pallidus externa. So D2 neurons tell this not to go. And the globus pallidus externa normally inhibits STN, which is the subthalamic nucleus, which is right here, subthalamic nucleus. And in no-go, it usually inhibits this. But when the globus pallidus is inhibiting this, the subthalamic nucleus becomes more active. When it's inhibited, it becomes more active. And the subthalamic nucleus excites by sending excitatory signals to the globus pallidus. So it's contained here. There's containment of the thalamus and subthalamic nucleus. Right? So thalamus being allowed to free rein, not being inhibited, as usually is a go, is what you should remember. While the globus pallidus increase thalamic inhibition. The thalamus becomes more suppressed, so this strengthens the no-go. So the globus pallidus is keeping this as no-go, so it's containing this. And this is no-go, so you stay here. While the idea of go will be thalamus being allowed to go back to the cortex and make a decision. Dopamine's critical role in bias indicate. Dopamine doesn't simply excite or inhibit, it biases the decision probability. So it doesn't really, it just makes, it influences which way you might go. So dopamine effects on receptors on D1 is excitatory, right? The go pathway, it excites that go. The go. This is we should be thinking. Dopamine allows the thalamus to go to the cortex. These signals, the D1 receptors, are what make you want to do something. This is worth it. Thus, dopamine strengthens the go pathway and weakens the no-go pathway. The net effect is that the lower threshold for action initiation. So dopamine as a gain control system. Think of dopamine as a knob or bell of the basal ganglia. So in a high dopamine state, go signals are amplified and no-go signals are suppressed. Make faster decisions. So thalamus is making a fast movement here, right? Go. And there's greater risk detecting, more movement, more cognitive flexibility. While in low dopamine state, the go signals are weak, stays here, and there's hesitation, slowness, rigidity, and reduced motivation, like you would see in Parkinson's. The motor loop example, so walking. Normal dopamine is a striatal D1 neurons facilitating the gait initiation. Competing motor programs are suppressed, and walking starts smoothly. But in Parkinson's and low dopamine, the D1 pathway is underactive, and the T2 pathways are overactive. Excessive inhibition with thalamus, and there's freezing at the gait, so the muscles are intact. But the command never gets permission. This never gets permission in the Parkinson's disease. In the cognitive loop example, the decision making, the basal ganglia loops also exist for the prefrontal cortex, the working memory, and task switching. So dopamine in a cognitive go or no go is central working memory. And in high dopamine, there's rapid idea switching, increased creativity, and potential distractibility or psychosis. So, yeah, that's what I got for tonight. That's what I got for now. Thanks.